Today I'm joined by Catherine and John Nicholson from the virtual training team. We are talking about scaling up. In 2015, it was just two of them, and they had a small business, and they then decided they wanted to scale. So in our conversation today, we talk about all things scaling up. Who was their first hire? How did they hire? What's their mindset whilst they have been scaling up? Is there a grand plan, or is it all left to chance? Enjoy the conversation. Welcome to this episode of Stories from a Facilitator. Today, I'm joined by John and Catherine Nicholson of the virtual training team. Welcome.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Catherine, I always start these conversations sharing with the listener how we know one another. And I was wondering if you can recall.
Do you know, I can't recall when we met. I feel like you've been in my life forever now, Kirsty. But I know we've almost worked together a few times. It's never quite happened. Do you know how we met? Can you remember?
I will put money on it being a social media bromance. That's how I find all my good friends in the workplace. Back in 2015 even.
Wow.
Yeah, I think you're right. But we mix in the same circles, and I think our opinions are quite similar, albeit we regularly challenge each other as well on our WhatsApp group.
Which is good. And then John, we've not really met a lot, but I hear about you through Catherine. So welcome to today.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here.
So we're going to talk about scaling a business, because that is something that I have seen happening for both of you at VTT, and you talk about with me, Catherine. So I was wondering if you could take us back to how it all started some 17, 18 years ago.
Well, originally it was 20 odd years ago that we met through work, and I had this sort of mad idea that we could do this for ourselves, and we started a consultancy called Red Training. And we did a lot of associate work, and we had our own clients, but effectively we just ran around the world, didn't we? All around the UK, all around the world, and it was all very exciting, delivering to all sorts of different organisations. But it did get to a point where we were like enough. We need to have a bit of a lifestyle shift, which is why one of the reasons we started the virtual training team, which was 8 years ago now. I can't believe it. We made the decision in Tenerife, if you remember, one New Year. And we were just thinking about what can we do that gives us a bit more balance, and not traveling was something that was up there. We'd been in the world of virtual training for quite some time. And we're like, well, we love it. We're good at it. We're passionate about it. It's growing. Let's put our flag in the ground and go for virtual training.
And so, John, I'm curious, at that point, what did a lifestyle business mean for you?
Well, one being not on the road 5 days a week, and then unpacking on a Saturday and invoicing on a Sunday, and then going back out again, etc., etc. It was, I think, getting us back in the same room was quite a nice thing to do from a lifestyle point of view. And the original plan was that I was going to work a little bit less, and that didn't quite come to fruition. And here we are today, sort of thing. So I think it was more about we'd done a 20-year shift and travelled, like Catherine said, travelling constantly, becoming really brilliant travellers, because that's what
you do. Yeah.
And the 3 cats, but you had those by then. I think they probably influenced things. It's like, we want to be home more.
I love that.
I think that was probably lifestyle for me, or what we meant at that time.
Yeah. And let's just jump to where we are today, and then we're going to fill in the gaps. So where are you now? How, one of you describe what is happening for VTT?
Well, we are still in the same premises, but we now have proper offices for both of us. So you can see Catherine's is a delivery environment, mine's and a work environment for Catherine, and mine's just a work environment. So that's a sort of sign that we're encamped here in Lincolnshire in our home, but working very hard. We've developed the team up to 15, 16 people.
Yeah, so we're a complete remote team. So we literally are the virtual training team. We're a virtual team. We have colleagues across the UK, from Wales, Scotland, England. We've got some in Spain, and we've got people in our team that we've never even met in person yet.
Okay. And 15 people, are they associate or are they permanent?
Everyone's permanent. We do have a whole amazing associate network of coaches that we use to deliver almost all of our delivery. And so everyone is, I guess, more back office here in VTT.
Amazing. And my question next is, so how did you go from lifestyle to running a business with 15 people and sitting in the seven-figure, just operating as a seven-figure business? How does that even happen? Because I can relate to the first bit, but my brain blows up when I go, wow, like utter respect, Catherine.
Wow, thank you. A real moment looking back was we tried to do both things at the same time. So we tried to continue being associates and running our red training business while we built up VTT, and discovered very quickly that we're just going to fail at both. We can't be successful. So we had to just make some decisions and say goodbye to some work that we did, and not relationships. We didn't burn any bridges, but, walk away and focus 100% full time on VTT. So that was a big thing. And it was still just the two of us. But as we started to get into it and think about how do we build our business, we did a lot of research around like inbound marketing and how to grow, and discovered HubSpot as a CRM, which we still use and love today. And started to realize that to build our business, we need to create a whole load of content, and started to do that and see the results, but realize there's so much to do and there's not enough time to do it. So at that point, we decided to make our first hire, which was a content writer, social media person. And they were working full time to organize our content, write our content. We also at that point engaged an agency in India who were looking after HubSpot for us, because there was a lot to do and we weren't really giving it the justification that it required. We then realized that we had leads coming in that weren't being worked. I mean, how crazy is that, having a business where people are actively filling in forms, but they were falling between the cracks because there just wasn't enough time to deal with them. So then our second hire was a salesperson.
Okay, so pause, breathe. Lots to take in there. So back to the decision though, was it purely based on you just thought we're not being the most effective and we need to do something differently?
To begin with, yeah, but very, very quickly we realised that we had something. When you're like, we've got something here, and it would be a real shame not to explore the potential of what we could do.
And how easy was it to make the decision to invest in that first hire?
It was fairly easy actually, because we contracted somebody initially before employing them. So we always had an option, but I prefer never to really have that option. I'd rather commit to someone than commit to us, and that be the way forwards. So I think it was relatively easy there. And I think I'd add to what Catherine said, that what started to happen was that like Catherine said, we sort of realised we had something, and then to make that work, to exploit that position, we realised that there was a lot of work needed in the social media space and content, etc., that we just couldn't do. It was too voluminous to do, and we just needed help. And it then just became a sort of series of sort of steps forwards, rather than a grand plan of by the end of such and such year we will be at. It was, well, we need a salesperson to come in, and then we need the next person. And with the revenue being right, that enabled us to sort of carry on the journey.
Nice. And I was going to ask, when you make a hire, do you hire for what's coming, or do you hire because you know you've got the revenue happening already? Does that make sense, to cover the cost of the hire?
I think we prefer, but not always, we prefer to hire ahead of time. L&D particularly, we always compare ourselves to a rubber duck company. Get it? Believe it or not,
We do.
And we seriously we do go. Are we? If we were a rubber duck company, we'd have to have stuff on the shelf. We'd have to have a factory. We'd have to have manufacturing. We'd have to have raw materials, all sorts of stuff. And we're not. We're effectively as a L&D company. We are a consultancy that produces solutions that we then deliver, etc., etc. So. One of the good things is that where our investment goes is in people, and so we, instead of having to buy a factory or a warehouse or a lorry, we can hire people and therefore willingly do it ahead of time. And the phrase I always use with the team is, "Are we backing ourselves?" Have we got the gumption here to back ourselves to hire that next person, to hire another, whatever that role is? Are we backing ourselves to do it? And sort of we're quite top heavy actually with 5 directors as such running a 15-person company. Now that's on the basis that we've invested in because we don't want to be a 15-person company for very long. We want to be 20, 30. But we have to have those 5 roles covered in order to grow the company. So we are just sort of standing back and looking at it. I think we are hiring ahead and then backing ourselves.
To hire ahead. Can you just name the 5 roles that you've got that sit at director level, just to help people understand where your thinking is?
So we have marketing, and then we have coordination. That's our organisation of our workshops, our interaction with our clients to get those workshops organised, and our coaches. And then we have commercial / sales, and then we have operations, and then we have Catherine. And we call Catherine because Catherine is the part of our business that everybody sees. And we describe her as Point. We actually give her the title of Point. And the idea is that, when unfortunately a plane crashes in the jungle and the 10 survivors have to find their way out, and there's only one machete, and there's somebody at the front chopping their way through the jungle, defining a pathway for that group of people to move. That's what Catherine does. So we call her Point because she's out there at the head.
That's not on my email sign off, Catherine Nicholson.
Point. No.
I'm creative director officially, but yeah, that's what I do.
Well, I'm really intrigued by is the first hire was someone within social media for content, and then the second was within the HubSpot world of leads. Many people listening to this, often their first hire is a virtual assistant or someone within finance to help them. I know my first hire was Victoria, my finance manager. I could think of nothing worse than doing my finances, so she's brilliant at doing all of that. I'm just interested, what made you go for the content versus one of those 2 roles, or was that
we still haven't hired for finance? That's the one that we've been debating.
Because we've outsourced.
Okay, well there you go.
So instead of a virtual assistant, a virtual financial assistant. So, not virtual financial assistant, but we outsource our bookkeeping and our accountancy and everything else. And have found that that's been, we've formed a very close relationship with that company now. We used them prior to V2T, so it's been an ongoing relationship for a long time, and it works. So we don't tend to need that support, but we need the support, but we don't need it in-house.
I would say as well, Kirsty, that it all sounds very thought through and proactive, but we'd hired our first, the 2 people that we mentioned, and that's when COVID hit. And being the virtual training team, it's quite a good name to have during the pandemic. If you can think of, we had literally clients banging our doors down saying, we need your help. We cannot continue to do what we do if we can't train people virtually. So that very, very quickly, we grew a lot of the team. We had to hire designers. I think our third hire was a coordinator, then designer, then second salesperson, and so it went on from there. And that was definitely a how do we survive, even, because it was full on.
I remember that period because we were talking just beforehand about doing something together, and then that was when we were having conversations about, oh my goodness, the world's just changed. What's that all about? I remember that. I can see where I was having that conversation with you. So that was only in 2020. So I was going to say the trajectory. So it's the last 3-4 years where it suddenly started to even increase even more. And COVID was something that time worked for you. Like, it's where I saw this, like, finally corporations accepted that learning can happen virtually, which was great news for us all, I think.
Yeah, it's a blessing and a curse for us. Obviously, people involved, it was just a curse. In that we got very busy very quickly, but before the pandemic, our niche was virtual training. And once the pandemic hit, every training company was a virtual training company. So we've had to work since then to keep staying ahead and readjusting and see what makes us different. And we're now going back to more of a blended approach. We're now we're delivering face to face. We're bringing in VR and all of that. So we've had to really keep slashing away going forward to figure out what's next and how do we stay either ahead or further ahead of the race, really.
A question I had, because there's two of you and you started a business together, do you think that makes it easier to make some of these decisions that you have been making about scaling up, because there's two of you to have a chat with?
I would say definitely. What do you think,
Well,
John?
yeah, so something to consider is that Catherine is a fairly high optimist, and I am not. I don't think I'm a high pessimist, but I've had a long corporate career prior to doing all of this, and that was quite tough, and it sort of you get bashed around a bit sometimes, and you learn a lot of lessons and all of that sort of stuff. So I think I probably agree with Catherine, but on that basis that if it was just Catherine making decisions, we probably wouldn't be sitting here talking today. We'd either be on a Caribbean island having a cocktail because we've made our trillions, or Catherine would be in a debtor's jail somewhere.
That's so true, actually.
But having the so if we're here to talk about making decisions and scaling, I think it's incredibly useful to have serious, hard-nosed conversations about what is it we actually want to achieve, what are we prepared to put into this, what are we prepared to invest in terms of pound notes, and the hard work and all of that sort of stuff, and actually trying to sequence out and play out what if we hire that person, what does the company then look like in 6 months' time? What are we going to get? What's the structure going to be like? And so on. So I think it's incredibly useful.
Yeah,
to have two people.
I sort of feel quite jealous because I'm on my own, and I always looking for someone to help me with my thinking, because I am like Catherine, I'm the eternal optimist, and I can get in my own way of making a decision. So therefore I get paralysis and I don't make decisions. So I think it's wonderful to hear that you've got each other.
And what people don't know, Kirsty, is that sometimes when Catherine and I make decisions, we actually shake hands.
Awesome. Well, because there's also the piece, obviously you're married, and so there's the whole dynamic of the marriage and relationship as well as work. That's a whole different conversation, I think, but I think that needs to be acknowledged, like how you work together in the context of VTT, being able to separate it and move it to another space when it's your personal life. So well done.
It stops arguments.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah.
But there's going to be people listening, and I'm one of them, who doesn't have like a second person to talk to. What advice would you give to those people about how to make those decisions that you've started to make? What could they do?
I would say you find somebody that you can trust as a sounding board that will challenge your thinking and not just agree with you. And it's really important. What we have, Kirsty, in our little WhatsApp group, it's so useful, isn't it? Because we are a group of 4 very similar and very different characters, and we challenge each other's thinking, and we can be brutally honest with each other and with ourselves. And I think you need to find something. I see people in our industry that have made mistakes because they just didn't have anyone to challenge them or didn't ask anybody to challenge them. And like John said, I'm so optimistic. I would hire everyone, forget to invoice, and it would all be a mess. So I think even if we weren't together in the business, having somebody that can be that sounding board is so critical.
I think the other thing is to add to that, Catherine, is I think a mistake that's easily made is that a decision is finite. So you might decide to invest in X or Y. And when you've not yet made the decision, you think you're either making a good decision or a bad decision, and you're trying to avoid making the bad decision. And actually, the outcomes of the decisions that you make, you sort of have to live with, and they are on a scale, if you like. I can't think of the last time we made a decision and it was totally, utterly wrong and failed completely. And I can't think of the last time we made a decision where it was a really good outcome, but it was perfect against the decision that we'd made. It's degrees of, and it's about working in the situation once you've made the decision.
But you'll never know anyway, because you don't
How can you?
It's like that idea that you go, do I go to Jamaica or Mexico? You decide to go to Mexico, and then you get your purse stolen, and you go, it was such a bad idea, I should have gone to the other option. But maybe you'd have gone there and broken your leg. You'd never know, because you don't get to watch the 2 movies play out.
But you've got to move. You've got to move.
So there's something about the momentum, like keep taking steps forward. What other mindset do you hold when you're in the space that you're in right now, scaling up?
I think part of it is you have to remind yourself why you're doing it, because there's so much to do that, with everyone, not just us, everyone listening, we're all so busy. The year flies by and it's easy to forget, actually, why do I do this? Why do we get up every day? So I think we've got like a few mini mantras that we use with all of our team. For example, if it's not fun, we're not doing it. It's a really nice reminder of, that doesn't mean that every day is a box of chocolates and things are really tough sometimes, but it does give you that grounding of, we're doing this because we want to enjoy it, and also we want to play, and also we want to be curious, but also certainly from John and my perspective is, we're curious to see what we can do with this, like what potential we can fulfill in ourselves and the business and the rest of our team, and that's really exciting.
I don't think we've ever had a day when we've said, great, it'll just be calm today and nothing much will happen. And or if we ever have thought that for a second, it's a very bad thought to have, because I often think it's a relentless onslaught of problem solving, and every day presents multiple, because you've got moving parts like clients and coaches and the team and all of this, and it's just thinking, when you're on your own, if it's just Catherine and I, we knew the business so well that we were running, and we knew each other, and we know each other's answers to everything, and we were seamless. We're very tight, and all that's great. But with all as you scale up, it just becomes this. The challenges are just more and more relentless. Not bad relentless. They're just there all the time. So we recently had somebody who became pregnant, and we suddenly realised we didn't have a policy for that circumstance. So there, you've got to write it, but then we had to talk to the team about what should be our policy and how should we treat that circumstance, etc. And it's just every day you're sort of buying more. As you scale up, you're buying more challenges, and I often equate that to, as a company of 15 people, we're dealing with the same amount of challenges as a company of 1,000 people. And so the mindset is it never stops. And you just keep smiling because it never will stop.
You've got to, and if you didn't enjoy that, then you shouldn't do it, should you? Because it would grind you down.
And just to add one more thing, I often share with members of the team is like, this is the running a small business like we are and growing it. It's all about us making decisions. No one's putting rules on us as to what we do or where we go or who we hire. It's within our grasp. So we must never sort of. Sometimes you almost get to a point where we're discussing something. It's like someone else has placed a set of rules on us, and we've just got to break free. No, this is ours. We either make good decisions or bad decisions, but we have to live by those. And so let's just do the best we can do and move on. And that's the fun of it, is that we're building it, not a set of rules or a shareholder or a parent company or anything like that. We don't report to anybody.
Yeah, it's our game. In the language of Simon Sinek, and it's an infinite game, not a finite game as well. Which I always think when I read that book, I was like, oh yeah, we often come into business and these businesses talk about their goals, their structures, like how they're going to achieve something, and they make it sound like it's a finite amount of time, and therefore the decisions are finite. But actually, unless you're going, we will be closing the doors of VTT and SOF in 10 years' time. That's the only way that makes it finite. It's infinite. And therefore, so what does that mean for us as business owners, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs? Like, what's the legacy? That's where the legacy language came seeping into some of our lexicons. When you're thinking about the business now, because I'm sensing going from lifestyle to those first few hires, it was very much accidental would be unfair, but it wasn't necessarily as planned. How do you have a strategy now, like a 3 to 5 year strategy?
Oh, right, okay. So we're both giggling because we've been talking about strategy in the last week.
Oh, okay.
And we've just sort of signed off our strategy for next year, and we're not going to go apart from some general views of where our sort of our travel is taking us towards. We'll always be concentrated around learning transfer and delivering great solutions to maximize learning transfer. So we're probably not going to veer far from that path. That's where our love lies for it all and our skill sets that we've built. But beyond that strategy, a year ago we didn't have VR, and today we're close to having VR as a live modality to deliver our solutions. So where that's going to take us in another year, we don't know. We're not sure we can forecast. So I think probably like lots of companies, we're a bit shorter term nowadays than thinking 3, 5, 10 years. Back in my PLC days, it was 3, 5, 10 years. And I think, probably 6 months to a year is probably where we're thinking, and just having those regular conversations.
Okay. And how long ago did you start having more of a forward-thinking mentality? Call it a plan, a strategy, an idea.
We've always talked about, what's that phrase we use? Future memories.
Memories of the future, yeah.
Memories of the future. So we often, you sort of fantasize about, I wonder what life will be like this time next year, or what the business will look like 6 months or 2 months, 2 years from now. So we've always had that future thinking mentality, but it's only probably been in the last couple of years that we've started to formalize it a bit more. Yeah.
And what advice would you give someone listening to this who might be thinking, I want to grow my business some more than just being me? About, do they need a strategy? Do they need a plan? Or do you just wing it and see what happens?
If it was down to me, I'd be winging it the whole time, Kirsty. I'm naturally uncomfortable with plans and strategy, but I know that it's important, and I know that the team need to know, like, well, where are we going and where are we, pinning our colours. I get that completely, but we set our plan, and I probably shouldn't be saying this publicly. In the back of my mind, I'm always thinking, yeah, but we can always change the plan if we need to, because we just don't know what's around the corner. Part of what we talk about a lot of VTT is flexing for what's next. So if you look at AI, I mean, as we record now, ChatGPT wasn't even launched this time last year, and it's like everywhere. So the tech is changing so much. So I think it's important to, I really do believe it's important to have a plan and a strategy, but I think it's really okay to be willing to flex and change that as needed, and not see that my plan failed.
And Catherine, I think that plays something that you and I both have in common, because to the angst of various people who advise me, I rally against having a plan. And I also know I play better when I have a plan. But things that paralyze me are making the decision and thinking I'm going to get it wrong. But I know those are about my inner beliefs and my limiting beliefs. But listening to you speak, I'm like, there is something about being able to have a strategy, even if, like you said, John, for a year, 18 months, that gives us a compass, a direction of travel. And Catherine, for you, it's almost just like, this is the framework within which I can play. And so I'm really clear, like, it's about virtual. It is, and there is a slice of that strategy, which is what I'm hearing is about the future of technology. So what future technology can we bring in and be known for? So VR, AI, that makes perfect sense. Because, yeah, you don't know what you are in that space of technology.
And you have to mix that with the other changing environment is the requirements of the younger generations coming into the workforce. So they don't necessarily want to learn in the same way that people of my age, for instance, might traditionally learn. So that means we have to change constantly. And the challenge for our place, and maybe for other people trying to scale, is you build a team and they get great people, and that's really important. And it's fundamentally important. And you say, right, this is the plan. And then someone like Catherine comes along after 3 months and says, yeah, but we've got to go and do this. And it's that can be unsettling for the team to be in constant change, because many people crave, I need to know, I need to be on firm ground, I want to run the plan through, and constantly changing is a really difficult thing for some organisations to achieve. So we have to be mindful of the balance and how we introduce change, and don't run around the room all day, every day, sort of shouting eureka and tinkering constantly. It has to be slightly measured and introduced carefully.
I would also say, though, Kirsty, going back to your question about advice to somebody else, and your point about paralysis, which I completely understand. I think if you're starting out, you're starting to build your business, I think it's really important to decide, because you can get lost in, this time next year we're going to be X or we're going to be Y, and that can be a real big thing. But it could just be like, okay, I want to build my business, and the way that I'm going to build my business is by developing my social presence, or by having a content strategy, or by networking, but then making that decision and putting massive action behind it. That's the thing, because we can try lots of little things, but that massive action and really putting that energy behind it is when you start to see the results.
And the other thing I've learned is it's okay to be consistent in certain parts of your business about how you show up or how you do something. So to John's point, not tinkering. I could tinker. Honestly, I joke with my team that their greatest fear is hearing me go, I've got a new idea. And they go,
rolling eyes. Yeah.
Here she goes again.
So, and I'm the extrovert on the team, because I've got 4 who work with me. And they're all high introvert thinkers, and they just look at me and go, they're brilliant. They will execute, and they ask enough questions, but I see an initial, they're not as excited by me. Now, I have another question for you around hiring. How do you hire? How does that process work for you? So I know it works differently for everyone, but it'd be lovely to hear.
From like a practical step-by-step, like, where do we advertise? That sort of stuff.
Yeah,
or is it
just some of that? Like, how have you found some of your team?
By recommends, or by what was previously called weak ties. Somebody knows somebody as being very good for us, and LinkedIn.
Yeah, advertising on LinkedIn. We've also got 2 people in our team who were actually clients, and they've now come and joined us as well. So that's
She
all,
says
that's
quietly so the clients don't all freak.
Yeah.
But yeah, we generally get an advert together and put it out on the free LinkedIn, job ads that you can do. We don't do the paid ones. You do often get absolutely, when I say you, John gets deluged with all of these applications that you've got to sift through very quickly. And then our process is John does a initial 15, 20-minute just chemistry call to say, look, this is what the job is, for both of you to decide, is it worth actually going to interview? And then we would interview probably with a couple of directors or maybe a manager of the team if it was, depending on what the role was. Next stage is the two of the directors interview as a final interview, where usually there's some sort of task or presentation that they do. And then we make a decision.
Amazing. I hear you about the weak link / recommendations. That's definitely the route I have gone down many a time before. I remember, Catherine, you putting out a LinkedIn hire, and we were chatting in the WhatsApp group, and I think you had like over 100 people, everything from a fireman who wanted to leave, the cleaner, and I think you were looking for a content person. That you just had extremes of people come into this space.
We had somebody, do you remember that one, John? I think he worked at a cake shop somewhere on the South Coast and was coming, I can't remember which role it was, and John was like, I'm really sorry, I don't think that this is sort of, a good fit. And I think the response was, well, it's your loss.
I wouldn't share many of the examples of. But one thing maybe is just worth mentioning for anyone listening is one of the. I worked with a guy to write an advert, so I actually paid someone to help us write an advert. And one of the things that he recommended we have in there was, as a small business, the fact that we don't have bureaucracy, we don't have layers of red tape, etc., and really play that out in your adverts. And it really has attracted people to apply. I'm not saying they're necessarily the successful at it, but it's given us some. It really is interesting that lots of people are looking, might work in big corporates and have loads of professional services experience and all the brilliance you want, but are now looking, particularly with the advent of the working from home, working remotely piece, that they would rather work for a small company that doesn't have all these layers of bureaucracy and regulation and everything else, that can move quickly and is exciting, can make decisions and follow them through very quickly. And it might just be useful to think about that when anyone else is paying out their adverts. It's certainly paid dividends to us.
Thank you. What are the joys of scaling up? We'll come to the challenges in a minute, but what are some of the joys for you that you've had?
Well, I can start. I had a real moment when we promoted somebody in our team who was amazing, from being a learning experience designer to senior learning experience designer to then like head of the learning design team. And the real joy for me was I expected to say, look, I'm literally handing you the keys to the design studio and I'm going to moonwalk out of here. I thought that was going to be really hard. And that I was going to get that like sort of weird feeling in my stomach. But it was a joy. It was like this moment of, because I know you're the right person and that you're going to do an amazing job. That's a real joy to be able to, as hard as it is sometimes to let go of things, when you do and you can and it's the right decision, it's amazing. It feels so good.
To add a couple of things, when you're in a client meeting and one of your team members is with you and they ask a brilliant question that really is like spot on for the situation we're in, or culturally reflects what VTT is all about, like they really are VTT, and like you sort of watch it play out, that's like makes my heart sing. So yeah. And you think, God, we've really got something here, because they now own it for themselves, and that's just where you want to be. And that makes my sort of heart sing. And then knowing that I mean, we go on holiday and work a lot, and but that's our choice. But we could choose not to work, and the company wouldn't fall over. So that is one of the joys. It just separate those two things out. The company works perfectly well without us. That's the joy for a period of time. We do not have to be here every single day. We choose to, but we don't have to. Don't have to. And there's perfectly brilliant people in place to make good decisions and do all the things that need to be done.
One challenge each, one personal challenge each that you've noticed as you have scaled.
You see our thinking faces. There's lots. I think one of the challenges for me that maybe surprised me, maybe naively surprised me a little bit, is that I thought as you bring people in, it makes your job easier, and it doesn't actually. My job is just as complex. It's different. I know I can do some of the things that I didn't have time to do before, but there is sometimes it's we've had people say to us, "Oh, great, you've got all of these people in your team. Does that mean you can take Fridays off now, or get some more work done in the garden?" It's like, no, like no way. So you bring people in, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it is a challenge. Is that you also, by scaling, you've got to do all the stuff like you need policies, you need to make sure everyone's got their pension contributions sorted out, and they've got laptops and Microsoft accounts and all that sort of stuff. Takes up quite a lot of headspace, which I just hadn't, just naively, it just hadn't really occurred to me that would come with it.
And you've got the challenge of all of the team's future. And I think that bears heavily on both Catherine and I, that we need to run a company in a proper and fit way, that we give surety to the team that their investment of coming to work here is going to be repaid, for a longer term, and that the company is going to remain stable, and all the things that they would want. And actually, that is a burden of responsibility, is a challenge, and perhaps not a challenge you think of when you've got one or two people, but when you've got a dozen people, that then starts to that builds a bit. And so your decision isn't affecting one or two people. A decision is affecting the whole group of 12 to 15 people. I think that's a bit of a challenge.
One of the things I'm very conscious about as well, for all of us who run our own businesses, solopreneur, two-man bands, up to the bigger businesses like yourselves, is where do we get our support from as the leaders of those businesses? And I was just curious, outside of your obviously amazing relationship that the two of you are expressing here, where do you go to get support?
Well, I definitely recommend getting support.
Yeah, I come to you, Kirsty. I do. It's interesting. We've got so as a random example, we've got two of our best friends. They're retired. They were in a completely different industry to us. They were in the flower business, and they built their business from scratch and scaled it and grew it. And even though it's a completely different industry, they faced all the same challenges that we've been facing, and so we talk to them a lot, don't we? And it's quite interesting how the challenges that we have aren't just L&D related; it's just business related, isn't it? If you're scaling,
yeah, and find somebody who's advising you who doesn't want to just provide you with empathy-driven answers. You don't need that. There are a number of groups that you can join and pay a fee to get I don't know, however much money a month, and I think those are really useful. I've been on a couple of conferences. We don't do it because we've got the five of us, and Catherine and I have got ourselves, but I can see as a solopreneur or someone who feels quite isolated or just individual, being part of a group of people who are also growing their companies, who are in similar situations, different businesses, that can be tremendously useful. I think, and a really good investment, a really tough investment to make because, it can be quite expensive. You think, but if that, when you watch Dragon's Den and people go, can I, no, I want, I only give my, 32.5% of my company away for the investment rather than, 35%. It's like, hang on, see the big picture. If you're making 10 million quid, you won't care about 2.5% of it. If that investor gets you there. So I think sometimes you've got to think of the return and where you're going to end up.
And all I'd say is on joining a group, do your homework. Just check in. Are there recommends? Do they have a fit with you and your values? Okay, I could carry on talking about this forever with you both, and I'm sure there'll be a second episode later on. But I have some quick fire questions that I ask all my guests. Well, it's not that bad. Okay, and I think both of you should answer if it's okay. What advice would you give someone starting out in this world of L&D facilitation and training?
Two things: network and be on it with the tech and software and stuff.
I would say get yourself as an associate very quickly, so you get experience and build your network that way.
Nice. Who do you follow in social media land that you think others should too?
I'm a huge fan of Marketing Against the Grain, which is the CMO from Zapier and HubSpot, and they do a podcast which is all about what's going on, what's new in marketing and tech, and I listen to that every single week. Absolutely love it.
Concur, and I think still dipping back into some of the good old, like a Simon Sinek video or Rene. Any good stuff is just good to reflect on and go on, Catherine.
I was going to say, if you're literally just starting out as well, you've got to give good old Gary Vaynerchuk a go. If you want to get pumped and motivated to, create lots of content, then he's going to make you do it.
Those who don't know Gary V, quick headline, what does he do?
So Gary V is an American. He's expert in social media and content creation, and he's incredibly successful and is very sweary. So if you don't like cursing, don't listen.
Yeah. How have you invested in yourself or your business to support you to move forward?
We actually went to see Gary Vee a few years ago.
Good answer.
Live in Birmingham.
I remember. Catherine was very excited.
I was.
You don't need to go and see him live. Just watch his stuff. It's the same on stage.
Okay.
Catherine, you read a huge amount of stuff.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was struggling there, but I do. I read, I listen to podcasts the whole time.
And being in a learning company, we do set out to learn. We have learning time internally. So
nice.
We have what we call a disco, a discovery session. And we have that every week in-house so that the whole team come together and somebody shares their latest workshop or they share some other significant learning for the whole company. And so I think we're doing it internally and then externally as well.
Can I quickly change my answer? Yes, Reid, that's really important. But if you're in L&D, you might do that anyway. Get involved in some groups.
Yeah.
Nice.
I've been just so... I've found some really useful groups that aren't necessarily L&D that I've just got loads from.
Nice. And final one, what book do you recommend people read?
I'm going to go with Radical Candor. This is absolutely wrecked. I think anyone that needs to have tough conversations or manage anybody, this is just a really good reminder of the importance of having those challenging conversations from a position of care.
Catherine, who wrote Radical Candor?
Kim Scott.
Thank you. So Radical Candor, Kim Scott.
John? There are so many. If you haven't read it or you haven't read it for 10 years, How to Win Friends and Influence People, because for me, we talk about the tech and we talk about products, we talk about this, that and the other, but ultimately an awful lot of your future success is going to be based on the relationships and how you treat people and how you treat interactions. So, there's a lot to learn from that book, or to remind ourselves of, authentic engagement with other humans.
And can you remember who wrote that?
Dale Carnegie.
Thank you.
It's still in my top 10 recommends for sure. Yeah.
We're going to collect them all together. John, Catherine, thank you so much for being my guests today. It's been brilliant, and good luck with the future. And I really, really look forward to seeing what comes next.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Loved it.